Thanks everyone for joining me for another episode on the Travel Collective, where we meet travelers, we talk destinations, and find unique places to go. So I'm happy to have a conversation today with Steph. We were talking on another episode about pet sitting, so check that one out. Lonely Planet, though, this year, which is a popular guidebook series, and they always start publishing these like places to go in the coming year. They've already published their 2025 places to go, and they also this year added a trending travel, like kind of topics, things that are trending as far as travel. And one of those is underrated parks and destinations. So I wanted to welcome Steph back because she said she went to 19 states last year. So welcome back, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about some of the places you visited on this 19 state journey last year.
Yeah, I think I'm not a detail person. I'm not a planner. I have ADHD and I'm a big picture person, but details just are not my forte. And so I typically can get really overwhelmed with something like planning a trip. And so what I did when I started trying to plan all these events and activities this year is I realized I needed something to center my travels around. I can't just say, where do I want to go? Because I want to go everywhere. So I realized I needed something to center everything around, and I landed on the national parks. And so that's what started. I would say that was the main focus at the beginning of the year was the national parks. And then once I figured out kind of my schedule and where I was going and where I was staying, I started looking for other things in the vicinity.
Oh,
I
nice.
am an outdoor nature person. That is what I travel for. I don't care about food. I'm not so into history. I travel for nature and outdoor adventures. I'm really into amazing scenery and landscapes. So anytime I can just look outside and see something amazing, that's what I travel for. The views, as they say.
Yeah.
So when I was going to the national parks, I'm in some Facebook groups. I would do some research online. I will save articles and stories into folders
Oh, that's
based on
fun.
location. So let's say I'm going to um, Oregon. Here's my folder of all the articles and stories I read about Oregon, and let me see how many of those I can incorporate into the trip. And so that's how I would do it. And uh, the, with the national parks, I think there's 63 capital N, capital P national parks,
Yeah.
but there's hundreds of national park sites.
Yes.
It's just the big capital N, capital P. Those are the ones that people think of when they think of national parks, and some of them can be very crowded. Some of them are huge and take days, to really explore. And what I started to find is really amazing state parks
Yes.
and national monuments, which are part of the national park system, but have a fraction of the visitors of the capital NPs. And so I started, and then I would, then all of a sudden my social feeds and my news feeds are, crazy
Yeah.
places you've never been before, and so then I just start coming across all these places I've never even heard of. And I started incorporating as many of those as possible into my trips, even if it's just 2 hours, even if I just have 2 hours to go by this place. And I will absolutely go out of my way to go see something cool because that's kind of the whole point,
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think obviously the capital national parks are amazing, every one of them, and they're all so different. That's what I
Yes.
really love about them is even the ones in the same state, like Utah has five, Washington has
Right.
three. I've been to all three in Washington. I've been to four of the five in Utah. Like every one of them is so different from the other ones. Um, but what I really loved were the national monuments. because they were just so unknown and uncrowded. And also, there were certain parts of the country that I never would have chosen to go
Yeah,
visit before,
right.
but I ended up there for various reasons and absolutely loved them. So that was really interesting too. I would say those were the national monuments, and then just certain parts of the country, like Idaho is probably my prime example of that. It was never in my mind to go to Idaho. There wasn't anything about Idaho. And even when you look at the map of the national parks, it goes around
Right. Yeah, it goes
Idaho.
around exactly. And you don't,
So,
Idaho just doesn't pop up on a lot of
yeah,
like must go visit. You're right. So that's why I'm curious. Like, how did you, what you thought of Idaho? I don't even think a lot of, I mean, all people think about Idaho, poor Idaho gets stuck with potatoes, and that's
potatoes.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. So the first time I was there was part of the biggest chunk I went for about 3 months, and I live in Oklahoma currently, and I went basically everywhere west of Oklahoma. So north, south, just everywhere on the
Yeah.
western half of the US and Canada. Um, and so as we talked in the other episode, I'm a traveling pet sitter. So I look for pet sits that are close to the national parks. And I got an amazing pet sit in a place called Driggs, Idaho, which is
Rick.
right on the border of
Wow.
Wyoming. And it's an hour from Grand Teton National Park, which
Wow.
Grand Teton is absolutely amazing. It's, one of the highest on a lot of people's lists. And so I got to sit about an hour away, right across the border in Idaho, and the host and I just really got along. We're very similar. I got to know her the evening before, and so we really had a great connection. I got to take care of her dogs and her cats. She has Maine Coon kitty cats,
Those are the
and
big ones, aren't they?
yes, yeah. So she's two Maine Coon cats, and she's got these amazing dogs. And so the pet sit itself was super fun. Her home is gorgeous, but it's an hour away from Grand Teton National Park.
Yeah.
So the days that I didn't go to the park, I was hanging out in Idaho. And I'm a hiker, I'm a cyclist. So I was able to do some hikes, some cycling, just, right there on the edge of Idaho. And it just wasn't ever a place I would have, pictured myself going. And then, um, oh, I had a couple days before that sit started, and I was coming from Colorado, and oh, what could I do for a couple days between here and there? And
Right.
so what I'll do sometimes is I'll either go through my list of articles and stories that I've saved, or I'll just open the map on my phone and I'll blow it up and just see, like sometimes you can type in things to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So sometimes I just do that. And I came across in southern Idaho, there were two things that were not super far from each other. My concept of far is probably different than other people's. But one of them was one of these national monuments. It's Craters of the Moon
Oh,
National
wow.
Monument in southern Idaho. And it is where there was a volcanic explosion, and it is this massive amount of land covered in volcanic rock.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's just fascinating. And even when you're driving to it, you can see the volcanic rock on the side of the highway for
Wow.
miles before you even get to the entrance to the monument. And then you can cycle around the monument. So I did, took my bike and cycled around the monument. But I spent all day there, which
Oh,
I wasn't
wow.
expecting. I was there all day. There's
Wow.
hikes that you can do. You could even drive around and see things just from the side of the road, just getting out and looking at things from the side of the road. It was just such a cool place.
It
So
sounds so
that was,
super unique. I mean,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. I think there are other, and I've even been to some of the other volcanic monuments. I would say to me, this one was probably the most impressive one.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
I think from a size perspective, and also, I mean, it's just so amazing you're just walking on a path and there's just volcanic rock I mean, it's just so surreal.
Yeah, that is very strange.
Yeah. And then kind of close to that, there is, it may also be a national monument. Um, there's a state park and a national monument right by each other, City of Rocks National Monument. And then the state park is something with rocks also. I only went to the monument, but I'm not a rock climber, but it is a haven for rock climbers. If for people who are, I just went and did some hikes and I really love rock formations.
Yeah.
So I just did some hiking there, but it's absolutely amazing. These gigantic rock formations just out, in the middle of nowhere. And so
Right.
there's people rock climbing and rappelling and all this stuff, but you can also just go be with rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
So that one was way out in the middle of nowhere. So both of those were southern Idaho, and that was on my way to Driggs, which is next to Grand Teton. And then from there,
Driggs is more near the mountains and forests than a little bit, right?
yes, from the house in Driggs, when I would look out the window, I could see the mountain range.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Um, so from Idaho, I went up to Calgary and I did a pet sit in Calgary and got to go to Banff National Park. This was
Wow.
right after the fires had gone to Jasper. So Jasper, all of that was closed, unfortunately, for, everybody who lives in that area.
Yeah, the fires were
Devastating.
pretty intense and
Yeah. So I was in Calgary, and then from Calgary, I was going to Washington, but I had a day in between. And so I thought, okay, well, what do I do in between Calgary and Seattle? And, Idaho,
yeah.
here's Idaho again. And so I'm in a cycling group and that is Rails to Trails, which is railroad tracks that have been turned into cycling paths. And I saw this one in northern Idaho, kind of by Coeur d'Alene, and everybody just raves about this path. And I didn't have a lot of time. I was just there for one night.
Yeah.
And so I just rode a portion of it, but it was so amazing. And I had seen in when people would post about it that there are moose that
Oh,
you can
wow.
sometimes see. So I'm thinking off in the fields, I had to stop riding because they were on the side of the trail eating.
Oh, oh, wow. Just right there.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm always by myself. So I'm just out there by myself riding my bike and they were and moose are dangerous,
Yeah, moose are dangerous. People should
Yeah.
really be
And I think I
careful.
was just kind of, in my own world, and I just looked up and they're right there. Like it would have been very dangerous for me to ride past them.
Oh, yeah.
Just stopped and I took out my phone. I take pictures of everything. So I'm taking pictures and I'm taking videos and I'm just giving them space.
Yep.
And then they, after a while, they kind of wandered off, but they were right there.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
trail itself was it was just an awesome trail. And I ended up, because I stop and take pictures so much, I always take longer than I had planned. And so the sun was setting, it was getting too dark. It was darker than I should have been still out on my bike. But I got pictures of the most amazing sunset,
Oh,
just
wow.
the most amazing sunset. And so again, this is Idaho.
Yeah, yeah. So
Not,
that northern part of Idaho, is it more like forests and trees, or what's the terrain kind of like up there around Coeur d'Alene? Because
Yeah, the
I
part
haven't
that
been
I was
there.
in, I started the ride in a state park. And it's yeah, foresty, rivers, lakes, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that was really nice. I can't really speak to outside of that just because I was literally there for the night. But the part where I was riding was
Oh, wow.
forest, lakes. Yeah, yeah.
So you were there in the summertime?
I was there. I left Canada on Labor Day, so September 2nd. So I was in Idaho either the 2nd or the 3rd of September.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
So nice time to be there. The weather was probably
yes,
beautiful.
yes. It was, yeah, the weather was perfect. Even when I was at so Grand Teton gets a lot of snow and it gets closed, right, in the
Yeah,
winter. I was there at the end of August. So it was very crowded, right? July and August are the biggest months for national parks in general,
right,
especially
right.
the ones in the north. It was very crowded, but from a weather perspective, it was pretty perfect from a weather perspective. And the same at Banff. Banff National Park in Canada was probably the most crowded place I've ever been in my life.
Oh my gosh.
Um, but the weather was awesome.
Yeah, that's why, again, that's why looking for these underrated parks, like
Mhm.
you said, there's all kinds of properties within the national park system that aren't the big national parks, and they probably don't
Yeah,
even have the same admission fees. They're
yeah.
definitely not as crowded. And like you said, I love the idea. I do the same thing. I'll like open my Google map and just spread it out and you could type in parks, and all of a sudden, like
Uh-huh.
county parks, state parks,
Mhm.
these little places pop up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. As you said, going back to the national monuments, so Crater Craters of the Moon in Idaho, definitely I would recommend that to anybody who's if you're going to Idaho.
Yeah.
But even if you're not, it's a very South Idaho. So even if you're not venturing much further than that, I one of my favorite ones that I came across was the Colorado National Monument. It's kind of Western Colorado, and you can just drive. It's the scenery. It is the you can just drive through. There's a road that just goes through the monument,
Oh,
and
wow.
it has lookouts, on the side, so you can just stop and get out. You can hike if you want to, but you don't have to. I also rode my bike there.
Oh,
It's
nice.
also another place for cycling. It's just on the main road with the cars, but I was there in July. I think even on a Friday in
Oh,
July.
wow.
I don't like cycling on a road with cars, and I was not uncomfortable. There was just not that many people there.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
but I got close-up shot of a bighorn sheep
Oh,
just on
wow.
the side of the road, just right there.
Oh my
But
gosh.
the landscape and the scenery is just spectacular. But like I said, I mean, you could spend 2 hours there. I spent the whole day there because I went and did hikes and things like that. But you could just drive through and spend 2 hours there. It's just amazing. The scenery is just amazing. So that one's in Colorado. There's one Arizona. This one I just drove by on my way to other places in Arizona, Vermilion Cliffs National Monument.
Hmm.
Again, just the scenery, just spectacular. And so I just drove by it that was in the winter, actually. That was
Oh,
in
wow.
February or March. And the colors of they're like pinks and yellows and it's just amazing. And then this one I had never heard of. It was one of my last days on my last trip, and I was driving from Colorado to northern Texas and going through New Mexico, and I saw a sign on the side of the highway I was on for a national monument.
Yeah.
And this was Volcanic or Volcanic maybe, National Monument. And so I have my kitty with me. And so we went there. It's very small, but it was an active volcano. It's no longer active, but
Wow.
it's so cool because you can drive up to the rim of the volcano and you can hike down into it, or you can hike around the rim. It's just cool. I
That
mean, just
sounds super cool. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
And there's also a hike that I did. There was nobody else on this hike, just me. But you can see where the lava had flowed, sorry, where it had flowed. Um, there's hardly anybody there, but
Wow.
it's just cool. I mean, it's just a really neat thing to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, the national monuments, I think, and I even in a national park group I'm in, somebody said I posted about one of them and they're like, yeah, I like the national monuments better than some of the national parks. But I think they're not crowded. Some of them people have just most of these I hadn't even heard of
No, I was
before
gonna
I
say most of these I haven't heard of either, just because they're
yeah.
not really out there as much. We hear about the big national parks, and I completely agree people should visit them. It's just that they are so popular, and for us nature lovers, part of being in nature is kind of having a little bit more quiet,
Yes.
time with nature, not we
Yes.
want to get away from all the people. So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think those are the only four. It wasn't until later in the year that I started paying more attention to them. And the same with state parks. I came across this list of the best state parks in each state. And so every state I went to, I would pull up the list and I would see if it was close to where I was. And so some of them are, hours away,
yeah,
but the one in Idaho, the rocks, Castle Rock, I think it's called Castle Rock State Park.
yeah, I'll look it up.
Um, and then, or I was in Oregon and I got to go to one that was not that far from where I was staying. That was again the scenery just amazing. And then I was doing a pet sit at Lake Tahoe, and that one of the state parks that's on Lake Tahoe is on the list. So I got to go hiking at that one.
Oh, nice.
Texas on my way back, I actually lived in Texas for 40 years and had never been to this state. It's Palo Duro Canyon State Park,
Oh,
and it's the
wow.
second biggest canyon in the US after that grand one,
Right, yeah.
But yeah, the second biggest canyon in the US, and it's in a state park.
Yeah, and
Um,
I hadn't heard of that one either. Wow.
yeah, so even state parks, can just be absolutely amazing. So
Yeah,
I think I'm glad I focused on the national parks because it gave me direction, but I'm also really glad that I expanded that and found just other, even when I was in Virginia in the spring, I went to the national park in West Virginia, New River Gorge National Park, and I went to Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. And then I had an extra half day. So I just looked at the map, and the hotel I was staying in was right by Natural Bridge State
oh,
Park.
uh-huh.
So cool. But I only knew it was there because it was close to where I was staying,
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously the things that everybody knows about are awesome. That's why they're national parks. That's why everybody talks about them. But I think it's really fun to just find these other places that people don't know about and don't talk about. I just think and again, they're so much less crowded.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, because there's not as many photos out there of them, we don't have this preconceived, because sometimes I honestly think that's true. It's like if you get to discover it, you feel like, oh, it has more impact in a way, because sometimes it's that, we've seen pictures and pictures and pictures of something, and then when we get there, sometimes it lives up, but sometimes it just can't live
Mhm.
up to the pictures, especially now. Everybody, we enhance the pictures a little. So when we get there, sometimes it's like, oh, it's not quite
Yeah.
as, yeah, it lacks
Yeah.
a little. Whereas these smaller, off the beaten path places, you're going to have that whole sense of new discovery, I think.
And I think one of the things with me, because I'm not a detail person, I don't research before I go places. So some of the places I went to, I didn't even know even some of the national parks, they were just on the map. I didn't actually know what I was going to see when I got there. And so that makes everything even more amazing to me because I didn't even know what I was going to see there. I mean, there are times where I will get somewhere and I it's unbelievable like what I'm
Right.
seeing. There was a state park in Nevada that I went to, and there were maybe 10 people there. I mean,
Oh,
it was a
wow.
Sunday, and there were maybe 10 people there, and it's one of the coolest places I've ever been. And I mean, I could have like spent the weekend there. It was just so cool. And then as I was leaving, I saw there was an overlook and I thought, oh, let me go check out the overlook. It was a whole nother part of the park,
Oh,
um,
wow.
but a totally different part of the park. And it just was like, there's maybe 10 people here. And this is one of the coolest places I've ever been, you know? So,
Right, exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely recommend the national parks, but I think there's just so many other places that don't
Yeah.
make most people's lists, like Idaho, you
Right.
know?
Like Idaho, exactly. So I think it's worth it to, and that's the other thing, if you're looking to save money to travel, you look at the some of the smaller airlines, they have like a direct flight to Boise. I mean, just maybe
Mhm.
for $50 from your town on certain days, there's those lower cost airlines like Avalo and Sun Country and Breeze, depending on what part of the United States you're in, might be a good way to plan some travel is look for those inexpensive flights and then look and see what's there to do for a weekend or 3 days or whatever you think you can
Yeah.
afford.
And even for lodging, if you're
Yeah.
there, it's well known that lodging around the capital NPs is very expensive. I've even seen articles on it recently about, is it too expensive?
Right.
And so, especially the most popular ones. So, even from a lodging perspective, it can be, a lot more expensive to stay near one of the capital NPs versus the state parks or, the national monuments where you might not even need a room there because, again, some of them you can just do in a few hours.
Right, right. And
So,
they
yeah,
can just be like, yeah, a spot you go to on the way to something else
right.
or, outside of a area that you're staying in. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what I did on the last week of my last trip. So as we mentioned on the other episode, I travel with my cat.
Yeah.
And I was all the way in at Lake Tahoe, which is California, Nevada border, and I needed to get to Oklahoma in about 5 days, which it's just so much driving.
That's a lot
And
of
by this time
driving.
I have been driving like all year.
Yeah.
And so what I decided to do is drive about 5 hours each day, but also find a place to go explore. And I don't like driving in the dark.
No.
So it would have to be, get up and go in the morning and then find somewhere in the afternoon that we could go explore. And I ended up just finding so many of these lesser known because I would just have to say, okay, what's 5 hours from here and what's
Yeah.
in that area that we can go see. And so that actually worked out really well. We ended up going to some capital national parks. We ended up going to some state parks, national monuments, just each day. Okay, what's 5 hours closer and what's in the area that we can go see.
Yeah.
So
What were some of the prices for getting into the state parks and the national monuments? Did they have like fees to get in? Because I'm sure a lot of them do have admission fees.
yeah, I actually don't know because I have a park pass for the national parks. If you don't, the annual park pass is $80. Oh my gosh, I've gone to 19 national parks, not even counting the national monuments.
Right.
So for $80, because in some of just the national parks, it's $30 to get in.
Yes. Yeah.
So the national monuments are maybe 15, 17. But if you have a national park pass already, it gets you into I think there's 623 national
Wow.
park sites in the country. Statue of Liberty is a national park monument. So
Yeah.
uh, and the pass, if you buy the $80 pass, it gets you into everything for a year. So the state parks are different. Some of the state parks you can buy in some of the states, they have a pass that gets you into any state park in the state. Like I think maybe Washington has that. You can
Yeah.
get into any of the parks in the state. But because I wasn't usually going to more than one, I would just pay the entrance fee. So I don't know, $7, $12. I mean,
Yeah. Most of them are pretty inexpensive for the most part. And that's if
yeah.
they're charging. I mean, some of them, don't, you'll just drive in and park, and or if you're driving through even, you don't really have to pay. But do pay
Mhm.
attention. Some of them do, you do need to have some sort of pass if you do plan to park, hike, ride your bike, because
Yeah.
they will, even when I was in Utah, I wanted to go to some little park thing and you needed to park. And I did notice they come through and check every now and then. So,
When I think too, some people kind of want to skirt the system, right? And even the state park I was at on a Sunday where there were 10 people, nobody would have known. I don't even think anybody was working that day.
yeah.
But if I'm going to come enjoy this place, why would I not contribute to that?
Yeah, that's how I
You know what I
feel.
mean?
You're
Like
really
why,
supporting
yeah.
us protecting that space, keeping it clean, just maintaining it. I mean, there is
Yes.
maintenance fees and whatnot. So I agree.
Yeah. And for the national park pass, it's called the America the Beautiful Pass, the one that's $80, where you can buy it online, but if you buy it at a specific park, a higher percentage of the proceeds go to that specific park.
Oh,
So if you
nice.
have a specific park that, maybe you live by or that you're really, kind of prone to fond of, you can buy your pass at that park and more of the proceeds will go there. But yeah, $80.
Yeah.
Absolutely worth it for me after the third park I went to.
Right, right. And then all, like you said, all the different properties that you have access to with your travels.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been super fun stuff. So tell people if they want to reach out to you or have questions about more of your travels or how to travel with a pet, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have anything public because this has nothing to do with what I do. This is just my lifestyle right now. But I do run a business. I run an online business and have a website for that. So it's www.starfishsocialclub.org. That's my business. So that's probably the most public that I am. I do, my social media is all private. But yeah, you can definitely find me there, see more about what I do that allows me to
Yeah.
to spend so much time traveling. So
Do you post your pictures anywhere?
I do on my social media, but I don't have them public. I think I post every day wherever I am, and I take more pictures than anybody I know, but because I post every day where I am, I keep it private just,
No, no,
for
no.
my
I had always advised that. I mean, even if like I have an Instagram account, but I always try not to post the same day of where I am. And I think male or female, if you're out traveling by yourself, it's just probably safer for yourself and your family and loved ones to just, you can privately text photos, but not be, here I am, like
Yeah.
so I totally agree. I think that's smart. Thank
I
you.
post it at the end of the day because by then I'm already somewhere else.
Yeah, there
So
you go. Right, you're down the road. I hear you.
yeah.
Smart. Well, this has been so informative. Thank you so much for sharing about some of the places you visited last year, Steph. So,
Yeah.
and I hope we
Thank
can
you for
chat
having
again.
me.
Yeah, I hope we'll catch up again sometime. So, thanks everyone for taking a listen. And Steph is probably in some of those national park groups, though, on Facebook. So, I think there's a lot of Facebook groups if you have an interest in biking or hiking or whatever it is that can give some really good info. So, that's another great tip. So.
Yeah. I love Facebook groups. I'm not a fan of Facebook in general. I'm actually off of it right now. But Facebook groups, I think, are absolutely amazing, just resources.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you can connect with people that have actually maybe been there. And if you know you're going to spend time in a particular state, even a lot of the states have now, or the cities, they'll have a page and you can, see what's happening,
Mhm.
events and things like that too. So always
Yeah.
a good resource. Thank you so much, Steph. I really appreciate connecting with you.
Thank you.